The wind howled through the towering trees that surrounded Charleville Forest Castle, their branches twisting and contorting like skeletal hands reaching out in a desperate plea for help. The castle, standing proud yet desolate in its eerie beauty, loomed over the landscape as if it had watched centuries pass and secrets grow old with time. Built between 1798 and 1812, Charleville Forest Castle was a masterpiece of its time. Designed by the brilliant architect Francis Johnson and under the supervision of Charles William Barry, the first Earl of Charleville, the castle was meant to be a symbol of the Charleville family's wealth, power, and extravagant taste. But there was always something off about it, a strange sense of unease that clung to the place like a thick fog. Construction was far from easy. The Charleville family, with their lavish lifestyle, found themselves living beyond their means, and so the project was delayed time and time again. Every time the builders were on the verge of completing one magnificent feature, another extravagant detail would be added. A fabulous ceiling design in the dining room by William Morris, a grand staircase with ornate carvings and windows that stretched like the wings of a giant bird. Yet the castle never seemed to reach its final form. Construction would halt, only to begin again with an even grander vision. For a time, the family would reside within its walls, enjoying the riches their wealth provided. But those moments were fleeting, and for the majority of its existence, Charleville Forest Castle stood empty, its walls echoing with forgotten sounds of laughter, its rooms filled with only dust and cobwebs. The grandeur of the Charleville family faded into the past, and by the 1960s, the castle had been abandoned, but the spirits of the past refused to leave, and the whispers of the dead grew louder. In the late 1990s, Bridget Vance, an ambitious and determined woman, purchased Charleville Forest Castle with a dream of restoring it to its former glory. The task was monumental, but Bridget was driven by the desire to revive the castle's splendor, to give it a new life. Yet, from the moment she stepped foot inside, something seemed wrong. The castle was not empty, not in the way she had imagined. At first, it was little things, creaks in the floorboards, the flicker of lights that never seemed to stay on. But as the restoration began, the true nature of the place revealed itself. Local craftsmen, brought in to refurbish the castle, quickly began to notice strange occurrences, unexplainable events that chilled them to their bones. Tools would go missing, only to reappear hours later in places no one had been. Workers would hear voices when no one was around, and the worst was yet to come. One evening, Bridget's young daughter Kate was locked in a cupboard in the nursery. The door had slammed shut with a force no child could muster, and though she screamed and cried for help, no one could open it. It wasn't until Bridget arrived with a frantic key that the door was freed. Kate's face was pale, her wide eyes filled with terror. "They did it," she whispered, as if speaking to someone invisible. "They?" Bridget had asked, confused. "The children," Kate replied, her voice trembling. It wasn't long before Bridget realized that the restoration had awoken something far darker than old stones and dusty rooms. The ghosts of Charleville Forest Castle were not content to remain forgotten, and as each day passed, they grew stronger. One night, after a party thrown in the grand hall of the castle, a guest named Richard Hayes decided to stay behind. He was a longtime friend of Bridget's family, and after a night of laughter and whiskey, he had made himself a pallet on the floor and drifted off to sleep. But when Bridget's children came to check on him the next morning, they found something odd. Richard's door had been left wide open, and the lights were still on in the room. This wasn't typical behavior for him. Richard was a private man, and he preferred to sleep in darkness. When Bridget asked him about it, Richard's face turned pale. I don't know what happened," he said, his voice shaky. "I overheard two men talking in the hall, but their voices weren't from this time. It was like they were from another era." Richard had heard the voices of two older Englishmen, discussing matters that seemed far removed from the modern world. Their conversation, though inaudible in its details, felt ancient, so out of place that it sent shivers down Richard's spine. When Bridget asked the workers about it, one of them, an older craftsman, had a chilling response. "The ghosts of the castle have always been here," he said, "and sometimes they talk to those who listen." It was then that Bridget realized the full extent of what she had inherited. Charleville Forest Castle was not simply a building to restore. It was a living monument to the dead, and those who crossed its threshold would forever be bound by its dark history. Of all the spirits that haunted Charleville Forest Castle, none were more tragic than the ghost of Harriet. She had been a young girl, full of life and laughter, when her fate took a sudden and cruel turn. Harriet had been playing the castle on a summer's day, wearing a blue chiffon dress that fluttered like a butterfly's wings. She had decided to wash her hands in the upper floors, and as she descended the winding staircase, she couldn't resist the temptation to slide down the banister as children often do. But in a tragic twist, she lost her balance. The banister, slick with years of polish, betrayed her, sending her tumbling to the cold stone floor below. The sound of her body hitting the ground echoed through the castle, and she was gone, her life snuffed out in an instant. Her family, devastated by the loss, buried her in the castle grounds, but her spirit never left. To this day, many have reported seeing Harriet's ghost. She appears as a flicker of blue chiffon, a pale figure sliding down the banister, laughing as she once had. But when those who witness it reach out, when they call her name, she vanishes like a fleeting shadow. Bridget had heard the rumors from the workers. They spoke a child's giggle echoing down the halls, of a fleeting figure seen sliding down the banister, and of the cold chill that would sweep through the room when Harriet was near. Bridget had seen it too once. Late at night, as she stood in the grand hall, a child's laughter filled the room, and when she turned, she saw nothing but an empty staircase. The nursery in Charleville Forest Castle had always been a place of nightmares. Once the home of the Charleville children, it had been abandoned long ago, left to gather dust and cobwebs. Yet, the sound of children's laughter still echoed from its walls, an eerie, hollow sound that chilled anyone who dared to listen. One evening, as Bridget and her family walked through the castle, they stopped outside the nursery door. Bridget felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the unmistakable sound of children playing drifted out from behind the door. But when she opened it, the room was empty, save for a few old, forgotten toys scattered across the floor. It was then that Kate's voice rang out. "They're here," she said softly, her eyes wide with fear. "The children are here." Bridget looked down at her daughter, her heart sinking as she realized that something was terribly wrong. The children who had once lived in the castle were not gone. They were still here, trapped in the nursery, playing their endless games. And they would not leave until the castle's dark history was put to rest. As the years went by, Bridget's efforts to restore Charleville Forest Castle grew more intense. But with each step forward, the ghosts grew stronger. The children's laughter grew louder, the whispers of the past grew clearer, and the figure of Harriet, in her blue chiffon dress, became a permanent fixture in the hallways. One night, as Bridget sat alone in the grand dining room, the air grew thick, suffocating. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, the weight of the souls who could never leave. The sound of the old clock ticking echoed through the room, louder and louder, until it became unbearable. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. Bridget stood up, her heart pounding, and turned to face the shadows in the corner of the room. There, standing in the dim light, was the figure of a man, tall, thin, and wearing an old-fashioned suit. His eyes were empty, hollow, with a chill creeping down her spine. Bridget realized that Charleville Forest Castle was not merely haunted by the dead, it was cursed. The souls trapped within its walls could never move on. They were bound to the castle, forever, and as the ghosts of the past whispered in the dark, Bridget knew that her family would never truly be free of Charleville Forest Castle. The curse would live on forever,